Bird populations in the United States have declined dramatically in recent years, but we can help restore populations on our own land and in our very own backyards. To explore how we can collaborate with nature, today we're thrilled to meet with wildlife biologist Rufus Stephens, co-author of one of my favorite books, Land Stewardship for Birds with Jan Wrede. How are you doing today, Rufus?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. We wanted to write something that provided landowners with a guide to how to be better caretakers, stewards of the property that they had entrusted to them, whether that's a backyard or a 10,000-acre ranch. Jan and I, Jan was the education director at the Cibolo Nature Center for years, and I, as a wildlife biologist, worked on landowner workshops for years. And the landowners came to us, we would teach them about how to better manage habitat, and they would come to us wanting details. They wanted nuts and bolts of how to do that. And this is really what that grew out of.
I love the very first sentence of your very first paragraph is, what you do is important. And I just love that because, again, so many people think about restoration and management or landscape management. They're thinking over large scale, but again, for the person that has a little bit, a slice of heaven in their backyard, they can have a major impact.
That's right. And we like to think about it as from a biodiversity standpoint, that what you do, even if it's a little bit of biodiversity in your backyard, that's really important. But Texas is a privately owned state, and so most of the land is managed by private landowners, whether that's backyards or whether that's, large acreage. And so what they do matters, even if it's on a small scale. That all matters, and especially when we talk about the decline that's happened to birds across North America.
Why has there been this decline that we're seeing in birds?
The major driver, and wildlife biologists say it over and over, that it's about habitat loss. That's the primary reason. But it's also habitat, how it's changed over time. Whether that's the type of management that's done on those, whether it's range practices, but it can also be the introduction of exotic species and decreasing diversity from that standpoint, even climate change and how that affects insect populations or bird migrations, and timing can get out of whack.
Right.
Those things are what impact, on a large scale, bird populations across North America. Birds are very diverse, and they use diverse pieces of the habitat. And because of that, they are basically can represent the diversity that occurs in the habitat.
Right.
And when you manage for birds, diversity of birds, you're also managing for the diversity in the habitat, and therefore you're benefiting all kinds of wildlife. So it's that they are, because they're so diverse, it's not one single bird, it's that group of birds that they eat insects, they eat fruit, they eat seeds, so all that diversity really represents the diversity that's in the habitat.
So their presence essentially is showing you that the structure is sound and that things are functioning on a greater scale.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the book is structured on habitat. So the first 6 chapters are all about different types of habitat types. But they're also what we call bird summaries. And those provide the basic information about biology for birds. What do they eat? What type of habitat do they use? Where do they nest? And so there's multiple entry points for people to come into, whether that's from a habitat perspective or from a bird perspective.
I think it has something for everyone because it goes everything from savannas or grasslands or woodlands or riparian areas to a lake or a backyard.
Sure.
So why did y'all decide to organize it like that as well?
I know that there are lots of people that have just backyards, and they go, well, why does it matter that I have, know anything about a live oak savanna? Well, their yard may be mimicking or was historically a live oak savanna. And by knowing that and using that as a model, it can really help them better manage their yard and look at it from a structural standpoint to see what they can do that could improve it, just even their backyard as wildlife habitat. So that's something, so using that as a model, you know, there are other points, there is a backyard chapter, but there are other chapters that can really help people understand a little bit more about when using native habitat as a model.
How can we start to help birds in our backyards? What are some sort of boiled down facts? I know it's not simple, but.
Sure. One of the things, again, as a wildlife biologist, what I tend to look at is I look at it and using that, you know, native habitat as a model. And one of the big things that we're short on in backyards is structure between perennials and tall trees.
Okay.
So how do you add more shrubs and more evergreen shrubs in your yard? So creating layers of habitat, structure in your backyard habitat is really important. There are also simple things like adding water. A continuous, safe water source is really important. We're just, you know, we seem to always be in drought, and it does, and so that's really important to birds. But you can use a variety of feeders as well as another way to do it. But really, as a biologist, I look at that structure as really being something for homeowners to focus on.
But with the water, I want to hit on this point because there's water conservation because of drought.
Sure.
Doesn't mean you have to have a huge, big old tank of water. It can be something as small as drops, right? Or something.
That's right. Actually, a couple flushes of the toilet is about how much water you would use in a typical bird bath per week. And the other thing that can really help are things like drippers, which make that sound of water and like flowing water without it being flowing and or without it utilizing more water.
What are some of the birds that we can be expecting to see?
Actually, we're on the pathway for migration down to Central and South America. So we get most of the birds in North America come through, or Eastern North America, come through Texas. So we really have an opportunity, even in our backyards, to see some pretty amazing bird life. But one of the other things is also in trying to increase that diversity is also thinking about insect diversity.
Sure.
Right? And so pollinators are very popular right now. That's something when we make a good pollinator habitat, we're also making good bird habitat as well because so many of our birds are insect eaters.
Well, Rufus, thank you so much for coming today. Your book with Jan, the Land Stewardship for Birds, and then also Jan's book, Trees, Shrubs, and Vines of the Textile Country, are two wonderful texts that I refer to a lot. And I just can't overstate how much wonderful information in there. So thank you so much for coming by and sharing some time today and some ideas.
Well, I appreciate you having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely.